Hello, my name is Jeff Smith, and I'm kicking off a new series of interviews for the fall with an interview with Barbara Thoreau. Hi, Barbara.
Hi, Jeff.
How's your summer going?
It's pretty good. At least we're now finally having a summer, huh? Now that the rains have stopped and the temperatures settled down.
Good. What's the best part so far?
Best part of summer? I don't know. I guess since the fair's just over, I'd have to say that because of, I don't know, some of the kookiness that goes on and just going out to see kids getting excited about their animals and fireworks.
Good. We didn't have rain, too.
No
which is
rain,
good. Yeah.
but hot.
Yeah. Well, Barbara is the owner of Missoula's independent bookstore, Fact and Fiction, which is located on 216 West Main. She's been an independent bookseller at Fact and Fiction for 11 years, and before that was a trade book purchaser for the University of Montana and Washington State University. So altogether, she's had about 25 years of experience as an independent bookseller. And we're going to talk today a little bit about the writer's marketplace and about the publishing industry, the bookselling industry. So stay tuned. So what's the best part of running a bookstore in Western Montana?
I guess all the people that are involved, the people that I get to meet, whether they be customers, writers, publishers, representatives. Missoula and Western Montana is known to have a relaxed kind of working atmosphere. And you can be relaxed about your job. If you're good about your job, it kind of perpetuates itself. And I get to meet customers who are looking for books. I get to meet the writers of the books. And during the summer, a lot of editors and publishers themselves are coming through on vacations to talk about things. So that's kind of fun.
So you've got your own community going.
We have a community going. And in the summertime, it's fun because people come through once a year to their cabins, or people that used to live here come stop by to visit, and they're delighted to see that we're still in business, and I'm delighted to see that they care enough about it to come and shop. So
Good, good. So you have supporters out there that keep your morale going.
It keeps the morale going, it does.
Good, good. And you made some changes in the bookstore over the past year.
Yeah, this year we gained about 350 square feet through a long and complicated process. The building that the store is in sold, and the new owners upgraded it to add some more space for, actually there's a law firm that's upstairs, and there's available space upstairs and down below. And through that process, it was an interesting thing that happened, and we gained space and some extra light and some room to move around, and we can now have better visibility and more events that can happen.
Well, yeah, so that room's going to be dedicated more to community conversations and things like that?
Well, a little bit of that. What we were able to do, because we knocked out some walls, is move some fixtures around and create some more open spaces and have some chairs and some seating so people can feel comfortable. And then fixtures are on wheels, so we can set up larger areas to have events, whether they be readings or slideshows or book groups and discussions. So there's a little bit more flexibility than we had. We tried to do it before, but now that we have more space, it gives more flexibility.
How many people can you seat then for an event?
Well, let's see. Counting chairs that we have, we can probably seat about 35, and then
Good.
people obviously can sit on the floor and stand in aisleways, and that's fine. I think the most we've ever had for an event was a little over 100.
Really? That's great. Well, that's a resource for the community then. Beyond having your own community itself, you've got...
I'm hoping that it becomes even more of a resource so that people know that we have space and we can have workshops there. We have tables and chairs that we can set up. It's not just geared to keeping everything in the same configuration that we're in. There's one book group now that moves a big round table up inside the front window so they can have things going on, and hopefully have people as they walk by wonder what's going on in there and come in and see things. So.
I really like your bookstore because I can go in there and if you don't have the book, I can order it and get it there and very, very quickly. So it's nice to have that resource. I like how you look on the computer and you dial into all the publishing companies and find the book.
The mainframe brain, as I like to call it. And, well, thank you for that compliment, although sometimes it gets frustrating, and time-wise for taping this show, we're in the midst of a UPS strike, so I'm not sure all of the timeliness is as apropos, but we try and do the job. Any independent bookstore is limited by its size, both financially and physically, so you can't offer all the books that are published. There are so many things out there, so I think in order to be a full-service store, you have to offer to be able to get in what the customers want and do it on a timely basis.
Yeah, and I always find that when I'm in there and I don't really know what I want to buy, there's always a good person to talk to, too, that can narrow the search down.
That's hopefully part of the training of being a good bookseller, and I try and instill in people that sometimes the customer doesn't know exactly what they want, and if we can key it down and narrow things in, and we have resources with computers and publisher catalogs, and actually we try and read as many reviews and magazines, or even ask you, now where do you think you heard about this? So that we'll go back and forth with a dialogue.
Well, good. Well, keep up the good work.
Thanks.
So what's the hardest part of running an independent bookstore?
Maybe again it's the same thing, the people. Some of the demands and the expectations. I think a hard part of being a bookseller in Montana is basically our location. We're here because we like the area and we like to do things, but it's not always the best place to be for distributing product. A lot of the publishers obviously are in the East Coast. A lot of wholesalers are also coastal, and when you have to cross several mountain ranges in order to get boxes of books places, you have to figure out what the easiest way is in order to obtain them. And you have to stay on top of how many copies do you think you really need. Again, it's hard to have, say, a month's supply of a title at any one time because you're never sure what a month's supply may be. Fortunately, there are distributors and publishers who allow us to order on a real regular basis and get inventory in. The key phrase is just in time. Right after you're selling the last copy, you'll get some more of them in.
Yeah, I've heard some horror stories from writers about scheduling autographing parties and then the publisher not being able to get the books for the autograph.
Oh, yes. You think
like
it's a horror story for the author. It's a real horror story for a bookseller when they've promoted a title and have done things. I've had my share of those horror stories. It's hard to predict what's going to go right and what's going to go wrong. When you set up for an author appearance, hopefully you can get the publicity. Hopefully the book has been out in time. A lot of times if there's a problem, it's because we're one of the first stores to have an event because the author lives here and then they're going on a big tour. And so it's an early ship. And anything that ends up being an early ship is, for me, a real kind of cautionary basis. So I'll work with the authors as best I can, but if they say, oh, the publisher tells me there's no problem, I'll say, now, okay, when is it really to be in a warehouse? And then I can backtrack from there. Again, in the last couple of years, I've seen some real strides taken, and that we haven't had too many nightmares.
Good, good. Yeah, after you've got a track record, it must be, the publishers must know and the distributors must know you and know what you need. You must have a personal relationship with them.
Yeah, but again, as in any other business, people change and people go from publisher to publisher. And you know, when a lot of times the people I'm working with on publicity tours and getting in shipments of books, they're on an entry-level position within the publisher. Sometimes that works to our advantage because they've worked with Fact and Fiction or the bookstore on one level, and then they go higher and say, oh yeah, they were really good to me, and we need to continue working with them. That's been a plus because 11 years ago when I opened, we did start having many events and working with people who weren't quite established, but I always felt that most authors obviously have their own audience and come with something, and there was no reason to turn somebody down. You don't always have big gala events, and I can't say that Fact and Fiction yet has what I consider a big gala event. Probably the biggest thing we ever did was for Last Best Place when it first came out, and somebody figured out that we must have sold 1/3 of all the copies that were out there, which, you know, in publishing terms is still small numbers, but it was a big event. I think a good example for Missoulians is Jim Burke. Jim has always been at Fact and Fiction for signings for his for his books. And part of that started because when the first Roboche novel came out, he was real nervous. It's like, not a few people in Missoula know me. I'm not sure what's going to happen with this. And I said, oh, well, sure, we'll have a party. In fact, we had a double party with Rick DeMarinis because he wasn't sure people would remember who he was. And, you know, he's 9 books later gone off to be his own kind of superstar in places and still
Yeah.
comes back, which is really nice.
Yeah, they just made a movie of one of his
Right,
novels.
Heaven's
right?
Prisoners, and he says that they've sold the rights to a second one too.
Oh, good,
So.
good. Nice to see a local boy
Local
do
boy
good,
made
huh?
good, yeah.
Well, tell me what this means, the publishing, the kind of dynamics of the publishing industry, what that means for a new writer. Do you sell many first novels, for instance? Is there a problem with distribution for first novels?
There are problems with first novels in that publishers these days are going after the blockbuster. They're going after the celebrity writer, the celebrity artist, and so they're not taking that many chances on an unknown author. There's pressure from the ownership of the publishers to produce, to get some numbers out there, have a blockbuster, the mega bucks. And they're offering big money to people for kind of non-literary, in some cases almost non-interest books for Montana and Missoula. So we need to have, I think, a shake-up, which is on the way.
You think so?
I think there is. It may take a while for that shake-up to happen. And there'll be smaller publishers, or what are called mid-list publishers, that will pick up some of the up-and-coming writers. There's a first novelist right now from Missoula who I have not seen such a good campaign for a first novelist as I have with this one, and that's John Lennon's book, Light from Falling Stars, that Riverhead, a division of Putnam's, putting out. He's publishing under the name J. Robert Lennon, but yes, it's Missoula's own John.
Oh, good, good.
And,
yeah, he's the guy who
really
works at the Museum of Art.
Right,
yeah.
right. And it's a first novel, and they're putting some great energy behind it and doing some publicity. And I think probably because I know John, I'm paying attention to it, but it's also refreshing to see that people are starting to do that.
Good. And what qualities does a book need to make it these days? And how much does a book have to sell? How many copies does a book have to sell before the publisher takes interest?
Well, publishers have to take that interest before it even starts to sell. So they have to do their kind of pre-sales budgeting and figuring, and some of that then goes back to how much money are they paying the authors. The OJ case produced so many books, and they were paying millions of dollars to people in order to come up with these books.
So they had an investment that they needed to protect at that point.
Right.
And they got the marketing
And
the
they got the
distribution
marketing
behind
going
it.
because of that, and that's what was driving things. So that's where I think things have to change. The big advances, I'm all for saying that authors should be making their fair share of money, but $4 million to people that are celebrities to create the blockbuster. And those are things that typically aren't going to sell in an independent bookstore. We may represent them because people will start hearing about them, but that gets into the whole issue of where is that market, where is the publisher driving their market? And with a blockbuster, they're trying to get books everywhere, and that means into the chains, into the Costco's, into any kind of a discounter, and then they are selling them at a less price than an independent bookstore typically is selling them.
So you can see that tie-up from the blockbuster idea. In Hollywood, it's the blockbuster movie, and it sounds like it's very similar with publishing.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of corollaries between the film industry and the book industry. And right now, the book industry, a lot of publishers own studios, so they're trying for the tie-ins. They want to have the hype that, oh, we paid a lot of money for this book, and on the same hand, Hollywood paid a lot of money for the movie rights for it.
Yeah,
Again, another Montana example is the Horse Whisperers.
Right, exactly.
And it sold for big bucks to a publishing house, and at the same time that the publishing house announced it, Hollywood announced that they had paid big bucks for it. So both industries were kind of playing upon each other for publicity, and some of that is that whole initial hype that goes on long before you see a book.
Yeah. What part does literary merit play in the publisher's decision to publish?
I think that varies from publisher to publisher, And you know, I think literary merit has different definitions between many people. There are editors within each major publishing house that are considered their literary editors. And then there are the imprint editors, the, I don't know, various divisions within a publishing house. So right now, I tend to feel that most of the major houses are not concentrating on a lot of literary fiction. Every season, and publishers have typically 2 seasons, now there seems to be a 3rd season that sneaks in, there's usually 1 or 2 surprises that are out there. And those are the word-of-mouth bestsellers that get created because of booksellers, independent booksellers, and others in the writing world talking about them.
Oh, that's a nice niche then.
Oh, I think right now an example of that is The Perfect Storm, the Sebastian Junger book.
Yeah,
And
a friend of mine it's entered into our conversations at home. I haven't read it yet, but it's come up in conversations with friends. You got to read this one.
Yeah,
this is great.
yeah, and John Krakauer started that. Again, this is another genre type of thing because it's that real life adventure and trying to report on that and what can happen. But it's a good crafted story in addition to having the overall appeal and the interest.
Well, I'm glad that you have that role. And, you know, I always think back to the kind of mythic editor-writer relationships like Max Perkins and F. Scott Fitzgerald. And I just reread the Great Gatsby after my wife taught it in school and said, you got to read this again. And, you know, it's a great book. So I sat down and read it. And one of the things I learned about that was that the publisher, it got mixed reviews. The publisher only published 30,000, and the initial printing was 30,000, and then they went for 15 or 20 more thousand after that. And when F. Scott Fitzgerald died, the original books were still in the warehouse. They didn't sell all the original printing, and yet when they went to, Scribner's went to publish their classics, that was the #1 title, and now sells 6 million books a year. Now sells 6 million books a year. So it's tough to get into the commercial environment and think what's going to be a blockbuster and lose this literary marketplace that could eventually outsell even the blockbusters.
I have somebody that says that the downfall of some of the publishers were the fact that the bean counters got involved. The MBAs came into publishing and said, this doesn't make sense. And he's probably absolutely right. He or she was probably absolutely right that this doesn't make sense. You're not making any money. How can you pay this amount of money? And look what you're doing. And then that trickled down into the editorial parts of things. The editors were expected to do many different functions, and they didn't have time to work with an author. They didn't have time to get to know the person. You know, it just became a routine. Oh, here's the manuscript. Let's clean it up a little bit. And the friendships didn't evolve. Editors didn't stay in publishing houses for as long as the Max Perkins and F. Scott Fitzgerald.
And they don't have the security of their jobs anymore.
They don't have that security. The author doesn't know that the publisher's going to hang on to them for several books. It may just be a 1-book shot. And I think that's partly why literary agents came into the scene, because editors didn't have time to look through some of the manuscripts. The agents now will hopefully kind of pick the best and the brightest, know what the overall plan of a publishing house is, and say, look, I've got something really good that fits into your publishing plan, and can take it from there and do things. And in some levels, agents have even started to do preliminary editing, telling an author that, oh, you know, maybe you should change this around and this isn't going to work. So I think there has to be, I don't know if it's a relaxation kind of factor that has to get in. The pressure has to be taken off of editors in order to start having some sort of sustaining relationship between the authors.
You said earlier about the NBAs came in and said that this doesn't make sense, but sometimes doing things that don't make sense eventually reward everyone.
They do, but you know, to give an MBA some sort of credit, I mean, publishing is a very different animal. And when you pay huge advances, and granted, if a blockbuster takes off, if a Stephen King is making you money so that you can start supporting mid-list fiction and going out and offering to, you know, bring along a new and up-and-coming author, then we should support that. But when people came in and said, oh, this is what you're selling, cut out all the rest of this. And, you know, hopefully that'll strengthen, in essence, the bottom line, and publishers will say, okay, now we have to look around and figure out what we're doing.
So Stephen King's gets a blockbuster, and then the money goes to stockholders rather than to develop new writers.
Yeah,
Or
it could
can-
be,
that
or
can
to pay
happen.
off some of the other sorts of things. I mean, there's a big controversy going on right now. Book business, as far as the retail business, books are typically purchased on a returnable basis. That's how publishers get the bookstores to stock in and feature a title. And if it doesn't sell, then it goes back to the publisher for credit against future purchases. There's no other retail business that's done that way. You buy it in an outright purchase, and
Yeah.
then you have your markdowns, and you sell it off, and you do things.
Yeah.
So the publishers have to not only figure into their costs what the advance is to that author, what all the production costs are going to be, then they're now being hit with huge return factors because of the size of some of the stores and the chains that are out there that are returning things that aren't selling through.
Well, let's talk about that for a minute. What effect have the big stores, the superstores, and the mall stores had on independent book selling? That's a big issue, big
It's
topic,
a
and we only
huge
got
issue.
a couple of minutes. But
Oh, good of you
give
to
us the
bring this up at the
highlights.
end of the. Part of it was they've had a huge effect, and a lot of independent bookstores are no longer in business. Some of which is possibly due to their own business structure and, you know, philosophies and problems that came about. But some of it was that chain stores were operating on what was termed different discount levels. They were getting deals from publishers. It was corporate world dealing with corporate world. The American Booksellers Association sued 6 publishers in order to have a level playing field. If you're going to make deals or if you're going to have offers, then they have to be made across the board to everybody. And we're starting to see, again, a smoothing out and a shake-up of some of those
Oh,
things.
good. I didn't know that. That's good.
It was an interesting, I was a member of the board of the American Booksellers Association for 6 years during the time that
good.
these suits were going on, and very fascinating kinds of things to see and hear about. I think that booksellers have gone through the worst of what's happened with chain bookstores. We're not going to stop them opening, but they're still opening, they're still out there. The independent booksellers that are around today, regardless of their size, if they're the size of a Fact and Fiction or a Tattered Cover or a Pals, have figured something out. They know who their customers are, and they have some sort of working relationship with their suppliers, be they publishers or wholesalers. But now I think the publishers are starting to go through the same thing that bookstores did. Oh no, we've created these monsters, we're getting huge returns back. So how do we deal with this? What do we do? How do we change our policies? So it'll still be, you know, a pretty dynamic and interesting kind of fluctuation, probably in the next 2 or 3 years. And then there may be some new ways that publishers deal with bookstores or with customers. And some of that new may be direct marketing, doing things on an internet. But it's still an interesting and dynamic business, and who knows, maybe the big major houses will par down enough that we'll get back to the days of the Max Perkins, and we'll have some editorial decisions that get made and some
You're an
belief in things.
optimist.
Yeah, I am, and I guess I have to be. I know if I stop having fun at what I do and if I stop being optimistic about it, it's time to kind of get away from it.
Great. What else? What else should we talk about?
I don't know.
What's coming up this fall at Fact and Fiction?
I hope there's lots of author events and some book discussion groups. We'll have Patrick McManus has a new book that's coming out.
Good.
Again, not that literary merit that's there, but he's a great person for encouraging people to read on all different kinds of levels.
And he's a regional
He's
writer
a
from
regional
Idaho,
writer.
right?
Mm-hmm. He lives in, I guess he lives in northern Idaho, but has a Spokane address. So, and he was recently in town and talking about things.
Great.
publishers continue to call. Fact and Fiction started a book and author dinner, and I'd like to see that concept continue. I don't want to do them all the
Book and
time.
authors dinner.
Right.
Now tell me about that.
The
We've got about 3 minutes left.
Right. The first one we had was the end of May with Jan Karen, who is a Southern writer and has just started to become somewhat popular within the West. So the publishers sent her on a big tour. And I wasn't sure that by having her in the store there'd be a whole lot of people that showed up. But we had a dinner that was at the Redbird, created a whole menu based around her books
Oh,
that
great,
there's
great.
a town called Mitford in Carolina. And people had a chance to meet with her, hear her talk, and have her sign books and do things.
Right.
So I think it's a nice, special way to interact with an
Well,
author.
that's the power of the small bookstore, isn't it? To be able to bring that congenial environment to bear. Thank you for doing that.
Oh, yeah, thank you.
Well, we're about out of time, as they say, and I want to thank Barbara for coming and speaking to us. Remember that she works at Fact and Fiction. It's 216 West Main, and if you haven't been there yet, please stop in. It's a really, really good bookstore, and it's fun, friendly people, and thanks for all your insight into the industry, just spending time with us. This is one in a series of interviews this fall. We'd ask you to join in when you can. And thanks to the crew, includes my brother. So see you next time. Thank you very much.